Mercedes and Red Bull just got caught using a legal trick that gave them over 1/10 of a second, right where pole position is decided. That's not an advantage. That's control of the entire race weekend. And for 3 races, nobody stopped it. No penalties. No investigation. Nothing. Until one detail, in the final meters of a lap, exposed everything. Because this trick didn't make them faster everywhere. It did something much smarter. It made sure they never slowed down, when everyone else had to. And once the FIA understood what was really happening, they didn't just react. They shut it down, immediately, just before Miami. But here's what makes this even more shocking. It wasn't illegal. It was sitting inside the rules the entire time. And the way they used it? Changes how you understand performance in Formula One completely. Because once you look closer, this wasn't just clever. It was perfectly timed. And timing is everything in Formula One. Now imagine a qualifying lap from the inside. The driver leaves the garage, builds temperature, charges the battery to full. Everything is prepared for one single push lap. And from the moment that lap begins, the system goes all in. Maximum deployment. Maximum performance. Energy being drained, corner after corner, straight after straight. No holding back. Because the goal is simple. Use everything before the lap ends. But that creates a problem. Because by the time the car reaches the final straight, the battery is almost empty. And under normal conditions, that's where performance drops. The system starts to recover energy. And that recovery slows the car down. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to cost time. Exactly when the clock is about to stop. Now here's where the trick changes everything. Instead of allowing that slowdown, the system is cut completely. Instantly. No recovery. No resistance. No drag. And in that exact moment, the car behaves differently. Not across the whole lap. Just in the final seconds. Where everyone else is losing speed. This car isn't. And that's where the advantage is created. Right before the finish line. Right before the lap ends. Right where nobody is looking. And the difference is not theoretical. It's real. Up to 1/10, sometimes more. And in modern Formula One, that's massive. That's the gap between first and third. Between clean air and dirty air. Between controlling the race and reacting to it. And here's the most dangerous part. You can't see it happening. No visual clue. No obvious sign. Just a car that somehow keeps pushing when it should be slowing down. And that's why it went unnoticed. For race after race. Lap after lap. Until someone stopped looking at the whole lap and started focusing on the final meters. Because that's where the truth was hiding. And that's exactly where everything started to fall apart. Because in Formula One, patterns don't stay hidden. Not when every team is analyzing every lap in extreme detail. Engineers don't just watch the highlights. They break everything down. Speed traces, energy curves, throttle inputs, every single data point compared side by side. And eventually, something didn't match. At the end of the lap, where every car should lose speed. Some cars didn't. Not slightly. Consistently. Repeatable. Predictable. And that's the key. Because in this sport, consistency means intention. And intention means design. So the moment that pattern appeared, the question was inevitable. Is this a breakthrough? Or something we're missing? Now this is where most teams would stay quiet. They would try to copy it. Reverse engineer it. Use it themselves. Because in Formula One, information is everything. But this time, that didn't happen. Instead, someone asked a question. A simple one. But in this context, incredibly powerful. Can we do this too? And that question forced the FIA to look closer. Because now, it wasn't just suspicion. It was official. It required an answer. And once the FIA started analyzing the data, the difference became obvious. A normal system behaves naturally. Energy drops gradually. Recovery builds progressively. It looks organic. But this was different. Sharp, clean, perfectly timed, at the exact same point on every lap. And that's not random. That's engineered. That's controlled. That's deliberate. And once that becomes clear, everything changes. Because now, it's no longer just a clever use of the rules. It becomes something else. A manipulation of a system that was never meant to be used that way. And that's the moment where the FIA had to step in. Not because it was illegal, but because of what it could lead to. Because if one car behaves differently in the most critical part of the lap, you don't just create an advantage. You create uncertainty. And at these speeds, uncertainty is danger. And that realization is what triggered everything that came next. And this is where the FIA makes the move that changes everything. Not loud. Not dramatic, but incredibly precise. Because they don't ban it immediately. They don't rewrite the regulations overnight. Instead, they change the way they look at it. And that is far more powerful. Because until this moment, the system didn't care why the shutdown happened. Only that it happened. Disconnect the system, serve the penalty, move on. Simple. Automatic. Untouchable. But now, intent becomes the center of everything. Why did the system shut down? Was it natural, because the battery was empty? Or was it deliberate, triggered at the perfect moment? And that single question destroys the entire trick. Because now, every action is analyzed. Every shutdown, investigated. Every pattern, flagged instantly. And suddenly, what was invisible becomes impossible to hide. Because telemetry doesn't just show what happens. It shows how it happens. A natural energy drop looks chaotic, irregular, different every lap. But a programmed shutdown, that looks perfect, clean, identical every single time. And once the FIA can see that difference, the risk changes completely. Because now, this isn't just about gaining time. It's about being caught. And the consequences are no longer small. Lap times can be deleted. Grid positions can be lost. Entire sessions, compromised. And no team is willing to take that risk. Not for a tenth of a second. Not with the entire paddock watching. So just like that, the trick disappears. Not because it stopped working, but because it became too dangerous to use. And that's when everything shifts heading into Miami. Because for the first time this season, no one has that hidden edge anymore. No clever timing. No invisible gain at the finish line. Just raw performance. Car against car. Driver against driver. And that's where the real tension begins. Because now, there's nowhere left to hide. No explanation. No excuse. Just one question. That Miami is about to answer. And this is where Miami becomes something completely different. Not just another race. Not just another qualifying session. This becomes the moment of truth. Because now, everything we saw in the first races is under question. Every pole position. Every tiny gap. Every advantage that looked real, might not have been. And that changes how we see the entire grid. Because without that final boost, without that hidden gain, the margins shift. And in Formula One, when margins shift, positions change. Now imagine this. A car that dominated qualifying, suddenly struggling to reach the front row. Another team, that was just behind, now right in the fight for pole. Not because they improved massively, but because something else disappeared. And that's what makes Miami so important. Because this is the first time all season, where every car is playing by the same reality. No tricks. No timing advantages. No hidden performance at the finish line. Just pure speed. And that's uncomfortable. Especially for the teams that were quietly benefiting. Because now, they have to prove something. Not to the FIA. Not to the fans. But to themselves. That they were always fast. That they didn't need that extra edge. That their performance was real. And that pressure is something you can't measure on data. But you can see it on track. In braking points. In confidence. In those final moments where drivers either commit or hesitate. And that's where races are decided. But here's the part that makes this even more intense. While some teams are under pressure, others are watching, ready to take advantage. Because if you were not using the trick, this is your opportunity. Your reset. Your chance to close the gap instantly. Without changing a single part of the car. And that's why this situation doesn't just affect two teams. It affects everyone. Because the entire balance of the grid can shift. Not gradually, but overnight. And that leads to the final realization. The one that connects everything. This was never just about a trick. It was about how fragile performance really is in Formula One. How a detail, in the final meters of a lap, can define an entire weekend. And when that detail disappears, everything gets exposed. So when qualifying begins in Miami, you're not just watching who is fastest. You're watching who was always fast. And who was relying on something that no longer exists. And this is where the story reveals its final layer. Because once Miami begins, something very clear starts to happen. The gaps don't lie anymore. The stopwatch doesn't hide anything. And suddenly, the grid looks different. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to raise one final question. What we saw before, was it real? Or was it influenced, just enough to change everything? Because here's the truth about Formula One. At this level, nobody is slow. Every team is operating at the limit. Every driver is extracting everything possible. So when a gap appears, when one car consistently finds time where others can't, there's always a reason. And for the first 3 races, That reason wasn't fully visible. But now it is. Now, there's nothing extra. No final moment advantage. No invisible gain. Just the raw car. The raw driver. The raw performance. And that's what makes this so uncomfortable. Because reality in Formula One is brutally honest. It doesn't care about reputation. It doesn't care about expectations. It only shows what is true. And when that truth appears, it forces everyone to adjust. Drivers have to push harder. Teams have to rethink everything. Engineers have to find performance somewhere else. Because what they had before is gone. And that's where the Real challenge begins. Not finding a loophole. Not exploiting a detail. But building real speed. Sustainable speed. Visible speed. The kind you can't hide. The kind you can't question. And that's what separates great teams from the rest. Because anyone can find a moment. But not everyone can maintain performance when that moment disappears. So as the laps unfold in Miami, you start to see it. Who adapts? Who struggles? Who is truly in control and who is just managing an advantage? And that's the final piece of this story. Because in the end, the trick didn't define the season. Its removal did. It exposed everything. It reset everything. It forced the truth to come out. And now, there's no more debate. No more hidden variables. No more unanswered questions. Just one reality, playing out in real time. And the only thing left to discover is who was truly the fastest all along.